10. Not from Skyrim. Argonians are indeed not natives of Skyrim, which may further explain, though certainly not excuse, some of the hate crimes committed against them and why they've been singled out for discrimination. Argonians are indigenous to the Tamriel land of Argonia, hatefully dubbed by the Empire as the Black Marsh. 9. The famous Argonian pirate, also known as Red Braham, one of the most renowned and infamous pirates to ever wander the seas around Skyrim, was an Argonian. Way back in the First Era, he invaded and terrorized the southern shores of Tamriel around Topol Bay, which connected to Black Marsh, Elsewhere, native home of the Khajiits, and Cyrodiil, homeland of the Imperial race. 8. An enslaved race. Nowadays in Skyrim, slavery is an illegal practice. If you find a slave, not a servant, but a slave, they're likely bound to a malevolent mage or perhaps are being lorded over by bandits and marauders. However, just because slavery isn't legal now doesn't mean it was always an outlawed practice. In fact, slavery is more common in the history of this realm than you would know. 7. The Freeing Flu. One of the main causes for the freedom of the Argonian race was not actually the war they waged. While the Argonians are fierce and vicious fighters, they were still vastly outnumbered by their captors and those that wished to maintain the status quo. Instead, the Argonians devised another plan to defeat their enemies: biological warfare. A conspiracy theory and fear in our current bellicose world, the Argonians of the fantastical Morrowind used biological to their advantage years ago. 6. Praise the heist. Finally, we ought to explain this heist that we've referred to over and over. While Nords and Imperials choose to worship the many divines of Skyrim, the Argonians worship only one spiritual being, the heist. These are essentially sentient and cognizant trees that nurture life, foster the wounded, and receive the spirits of the dead. Argonian eggs are placed at the foot of the tree as they develop. 5. Argonians believe in reincarnation. After learning about the heist, you might have considered what happens to the Argonian soul after it returns to the heist. Argonian souls, based on the courses they took in their lives, are deemed by the heist to be worthy, or not, of being bestowed again on a life force. If worthy, the soul of the deceased will be dispensed to a hatched Argonian egg and the soul will have another cycle of life in another consciousness. 4. They get political. The Argonians are certainly known for taking careers in less than prestigious fields, such as thievery and assassin work. However, no one should make assumptions about an entire race based on a few commonalities. There are plenty of Argonians involved in politics and government. The most commonly known Argonian sect of politics is the Enziliel. 3. The genocide of a generation. If you still don't think that the Argonians have a reason to be bitter against the inhabitants of Skyrim and neighboring countries, you must not have been reading this article carefully. However, if you weren't in their corner before, you should be now. 2. Argonians always have, and will, fight. Clearly, Argonians have faced a lot in their time. Nearly every time they've made connections with neighboring countries and races, it has not fared well for them. Their neighbors have made slaves and enemies of them, centuries over. They've had to combat every false charge and capture laid on them, sometimes with physical brawn and other times with intellectual wit and cunning. 1. A universal consciousness. Though never explicitly stated in the games, Argonians may have what is commonly referred to as a hive mind, and what is more scientifically referred to as a universal consciousness. Through their connection with their heist, which harbors all of the wealth of knowledge and history of the Argonian race, it is believed that Argonians have a backlog of wisdom they can draw on at any time.